Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new special feature program here on WFYL called Sunspots. That's S-O-N Spots, where we're shining a spotlight on people who are using their skills, gifts, and talents to help others who are in need. My name is Susan Locke. Joining me is Al Locke. Hi, Al.
Hi.
And it is our great pleasure this morning to welcome and introduce to you Dr. Leonard Dedesi, an orthopedic surgeon in the Philadelphia area who specializes in hand surgery. Len trained at Temple Medicine and has had hand fellowship at Philadelphia Hand Center. And we're shining the spotlight this week on Dr. Dedesi and his work primarily because of his past trips to Haiti to voluntarily treat the Haitian people. Len, welcome.
Hi, Susan and Al. Thanks so much for having me on your show, and I'm really happy to be your first participant.
Well, we're delighted that you are too.
Sure.
We're so glad to have you with us today. And I've wanted for a long time to be able to talk with you about these trips to Haiti that you take and the work that you do there. Maybe before we get into that, you could tell us, where did you train as an orthopedic surgeon and a little bit about that.
Sure, yes. A long road, as you know. Becoming a surgeon takes not only going to college or university, but then also going to medical school, which is a 4-year program, applying for a residency. And the residency in orthopedics is 5 years. If you want to specialize in a particular area like I did, then it's typically another year after that. So you're looking at 4 years of med school plus 6 years of training, which is about 11 years after college. I happened to get a master's degree for 4 years in between. So I've been in school for a long time. It got to the point where my wife was like, "Are you ever going to get a real job here or what?"
That's a long time to be in school. That's a long time. Yeah.
So I did my medical school training at Temple University School of Medicine, and I did my residency at Temple University Hospital. And then my fellowship in hand and upper extremity surgery at the Philadelphia Hand Center. So it was a very good training. It prepared me very well for what it is I do today and some of the work I've been able to do in Haiti.
That's wonderful. Thank you for letting us know about that. Tell me, what motivates you to serve in third world countries?
Well, I'm motivated for my love for people. The people in third world countries, they just do not have access to healthcare. They don't have what we have here. And for me to be able to give back and use my talents, my God-given talents, to serve other people, to help them and preserve them is a really a benefit to me as much as it is a benefit to them. And I truly thank God that I was able to get to the point where I'm at now and be able to perform these functions. It's really because of the Lord that we're able to do these things.
That's wonderful. Is it something you always wanted to do?
Well, ever since I went to med school, ever since I was thinking about going to med school, yes, I thought, I really would love to use my talents to serve in medical missions. And there's plenty of opportunity to do that. There's so many organizations that you can use, and it's just a matter of picking which one. So there's tons of opportunities.
That's marvelous. How often do you visit Haiti?
Well, I've been there 4 times. The first time I went was right after the earthquake, about 6 months after the earthquake that happened years ago. And then I've been there 3 other times throughout. We had talked about going again this year, but because of COVID-19, that got squashed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I've made multiple trips, and they've been to different areas in Haiti. So I got to see a little bit of the countryside as well, and the city, Port-au-Prince, which is the capital city there. And it's a very depressed area. I mean, it's a third world country, and you really see how people live in a third world country, and it's eye-opening.
Can you share with us some of the greatest miracles or testimonies that you've seen in your past visits to Haiti?
Yeah. Well, there's 2 people that I always think of when I think about my trip to Haiti. And one is a young woman who probably was in her early 30s. Actually, there's 3 people. I'm going to tell you 3 quick stories. A young woman who was in her 30s who had knee pain. And she really didn't have anything wrong with her knees. But the problem in areas like Haiti is that they don't have access to healthcare. So when they have an opportunity to see a doctor, they'll see the doctor for whatever small ailments they have. And so this young woman came in to see me, and I felt like I needed to do something for her. So I gave her just some injections of some pain medicine into her knees. And you should have seen her face light up when she could get up off the table and walk without pain in her knees. She was just absolutely thrilled and felt like a miracle had been performed. And I'll never forget the look on her face. And whether or not the medicine was going to last for a long time was really irrelevant. The point is, I made her realize that, whatever was going on in her knees was probably a temporary thing, and she was going to be okay. And that's what she needed. Mm-hmm. Another gentleman I saw and was a man who was involved in an altercation and had his fingers cut by a machete. And he had such a deformity in his fingers because when you get cut in the fingers, especially on the palm side of your fingers, if you cut all the tendons, then you can't bend your fingers and you can't make a fist. And he had all the nerves cut in his fingers too, so he really had poor feeling. But because the tendons were cut, his fingers actually bent backwards the other way, and they were curved backwards. It was really a sight. And the only thing he wanted to do was to be able to farm and dig, and he wanted to use his hands to dig in the dirt so he can plant crops. So the operation I did for him was to actually take his fingers, some of the small joints in his hands, and I actually fused them so that they were bent the appropriate way so that he could dig. And I put some screws in his fingers to hold them that way. And he was just amazed that his fingers looked different and were bending the correct way. And hopefully with time, after his fingers healed, he would be able to dig and take care of himself and his family, which is of utmost important. And the third person I think of was a young child. She had to be 13 or 14 years of age, who was a slave girl in Haiti. And she was brought from a long distance to see us because they heard that we had a clinic there. These poor children, they get beaten. They get, all kinds of things happen to them when they're in these positions. And the locals knew that they had a special name for the young slave girls there. I forget what it was called. But they knew that she was one of these girls. And she came to see me because she couldn't move her left arm. And when I examined her, the bone, her humerus bone, her arm bone, was sticking out of the skin. And it was like that for many months because she had been beaten. They broke her arm, and they broke it so badly that the bone came sticking out of the skin. And it's what they used to call a compound fracture. And so this is a very terrible thing to have. I mean, if you walk around with a bone sticking out of your skin, you're going to get an infection. If the infection gets out of control, you can die from that. Well, this young girl already had an infection, and she was still healthy because of her age. But I was able to open things up, clean things out for her, and get her stabilized, and hopefully her infection under a little bit better control. But as you know, we take short-term trips there. So after a week or so, we were leaving, and I was hoping that she was going to get good follow-up with some doctors somewhere. And the people that took her in were going to make sure that was going to happen. So I left very specific instructions what to do with her. But it was a shame to see this poor girl with a bone sticking out of her skin for months. I mean, you don't see things like that in America, right? I saw a elderly man one time have a catheter in place. He had gone to the hospital and he couldn't urinate, so they put a catheter in place. Well, the catheter was there for 3 months. I mean, that's unheard of. You don't leave a catheter in for 3 months in these situations. Usually they get plugged in with a special doctor who will treat the problem as to why you can't urinate. And when he went to the hospital, they wouldn't take the catheter out because they didn't have any money. So all we needed to do was take a syringe to deflate the balloon that's a part of the catheter holding it in place and pull it out. It literally took 3 seconds to remove this catheter for this patient. And yet he had it in place for 3 months. It was infected because he didn't have any money to pay. And this is the life that these poor people lead in these countries, where not only is there poor access to healthcare, but if they don't have any money, no one's going to treat them either. And it's a shame.
It is a shame. Have you seen any improvement in the years that you've been going, or is it still pretty much the same?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. So Haiti received funding from many governments, including the U.S., shortly after the earthquake. And I know when I was there 6 months and even a year or two later, their main, their White House, as it were, their main government building, was crushed during the earthquake, and they hadn't done anything to repair it. So whatever money they received likely went into the pockets of some of the more elite people and politicians. It did not funnel down to the people at all. I mean, we would drive through certain parts of the land, and their riverbeds were just completely contaminated with trash. I mean, there was trash just falling into the rivers, like mounds and mounds and mounds of trash. So the water's contaminated. Their floors in their houses are dirt floors. And especially even in some of the cities and even outside the cities. I mean, their living conditions are awful.
I'm wondering what the people's response has been to you. You mentioned the young woman who was so thrilled about her knee, the pain being alleviated. What other responses have you received from people?
Well, I remember going back to the same village maybe a year or two later, and I saw a woman that I had operated on. I think I took a ganglion cyst out of her wrist, and she saw me. She showed me her scar. I remember treating her, and she was doing really well. She was just so happy. A lot of people show up with small tumors. A lot of them are benign that are enormous, and they're huge because they don't have access to healthcare. They can't see anyone. They don't have money to pay to see a doctor, and they will have enormous benign tumors growing on their back, on their arm, on their leg, in their breasts, in different parts of their body, much larger than I've ever seen in the United States. Because in this country, you have a lump, you immediately go to the doctor and you get it checked out. You want to make sure it's not cancer. You want to make sure everything's going to be okay. I've never seen, well, scratch that. I have seen several patients, but it is certainly not the norm. And rare to see a patient with a large tumor like you see in third world countries. I mean, it's unheard of.
I have a friend. I showed a picture of you and some of your patients, and his comment was, "I've never seen so many smiles."
Yeah.
And, I've just thinking about that and listening to your comments. The people undoubtedly appreciate what you're doing for them, and they're smiling. And I think we here in America could learn something about the attitude of being thankful and smiling. I think they could teach us, but I wish they had better health care, obviously.
Sure.
But thanks for doing that. I really admire you for helping people like that.
Well, thank you, Al. I appreciate that comment, and I think you're absolutely right. I think every American should have to take some sort of, missionary trip of some kind to a third world country to see how people live. I never thought I would do this, but when after my first trip, we landed in JFK airport, and, before ever going to a third world country, I always thought like the airport in JFK was a dirty place. But the second I got back, I literally got down on my hands and knees and almost kissed the ground. I didn't kiss it, but almost kissed JFK Airport just to be thankful, because I was so thankful to be home, because it was the airport there was just 100 times cleaner than things that you'll experience in other countries or countries like this. I mean, you're sleeping at night with a mosquito net on because there are just thousands of mosquitoes in your room, and sometimes you have to keep the windows open because it's 90 degrees at night, and you're sweating while you're trying to sleep. But you need a mosquito net, or you will, get attacked and by the mosquitoes. So it's things like that. You take for granted some of the features we have here in this country and the pleasures we have in this countries, and the comforts that we have, and until you go to a third world country. And I think every American should do it. It'll prevent people from abusing a lot of the things that they abuse today. It's even in the healthcare market. Patients come in and they're angry if they have to wait 15 minutes for the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
We'll take a lesson in gratitude, that's for sure.
yeah.
Have you ever found yourself in danger or felt that you were in danger when you were there?
Yeah, actually, that's an excellent question. My wife, who you guys know her, she would love to go to Haiti on a missions trip and take the kids. And I have to say, it is every time I go, we have a discussion with the team about the climate in the country and whether there's any unrest there, because we don't want to sacrifice the safety of the team. So the point I'm trying to make is there's unrest in these countries all the time, and it's risky anytime you go. People have gotten injured and hurt. There are stories of people even getting killed going to these countries. I remember when we flew into Cap Haitian, which is in the north of the country, we got off the plane and we were getting our luggage, and there was a gentleman there who was, I don't know if he was on drugs or he was drinking or what, but he was making comments about, killing people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? So my antennas were up and I kept watching this guy because, I was leading the team and I felt responsible. I didn't want anybody to get hurt. So I was thinking, like, if he pulls out a gun, I'm going to have to go to attack this guy. Hopefully I won't get shot. But it's always a concern, so it's very risky. And even when you're there, we tell the team, you're not allowed to leave the compound. You are not allowed to go anywhere, because there's witchcraft there. There's all kinds of, different religions, and you'll get kidnapped. People get kidnapped there all the time. So we keep everybody on the compound. A lot of times we have guards on the compound. The first missionary trip that I took was in a gated area with guards that had machine guns. I mean, they don't take any chances. It's real. It's real. Those people have nothing to lose and everything to gain by kidnapping someone or breaking into an area like that. So it can be very unsafe.
Do you find it hard to leave the people when it's time to go?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm an American, so I'm used to my comforts, and I can't wait to get back here. But at the same time, I wish I could do more. And we start working at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning until the sun goes down. And people will come from miles and miles and miles around. I mean, they'll take 3-4 days journey to come to this clinic, and they will wait in line, starting the day before, and there'll be thousands of people. I mean, thousands of people in line, and the line will stretch football fields down the road for people to wait to get in. And at the end of the day, when it's dark, we have to tell them we'll be back tomorrow. And people do not want to lose their place in line. They will stay there and sleep there and not move so they don't lose their place in line. And sometimes they'll be in line for 3, 4, 5 days. And at the end of the week, when we're like, it's 8 o'clock at night, we can't see, and we're leaving tomorrow, people are begging us to take them in because they've been in line for 3 days. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to walk away from them. It's really hard to look at them in the eyes and say, you're sorry, that it's too late, but we don't have any other option. So, I mean, they're really sweet people. They really are. And it's really hard to walk away.
It's heartbreaking. Well, how is COVID affecting the medical care in Haiti and other third world countries?
Yeah. I mean, the main problem is that people cannot travel, right? They've made this issue so dangerous and such a hot topic that, people aren't even traveling. You can't even get over to Haiti. And while I don't know all the particulars of COVID in Haiti right now, the main problem is that we can't get there, right? So it's even impossible to plan a trip right now. We don't even know what's going to happen in at the end of 2020 and into 2021, right? So I mean, if COVID acts up again and the numbers start to increase, I know they're going to shut everything down. And people who had trips planned and areas that were anticipating, some American doctors are going to have to wait. And these poor people, they suffer, right? They suffer with their problems. They would love to see a specialist, or they would love to see a doctor, right? And they can't.
I think it's good for us to think about these things. We take so much for granted, and it is very difficult. It's difficult here in this country, the COVID situation, but for those in third world countries where they already have limited medical resources and access and resources to other things as well, it's so much more difficult.
Oh, yeah. Who's going to pay for them to get masks, right? I mean, let's even think about that, for example. Something so small, such a small little thing. They don't have money. They live on $1 a day there, right? And, I mean, you can't buy a mask for $1, right? They don't have money to buy masks. So even something so small like a mask, they don't have access to that, right? I mean, it's a shame. It would be great if we can work through some of these issues and continue to lend a hand in depressed areas like Haiti. But it's unfortunate. Nobody's flying. Nobody was flying for a long time.
Do you have plans to return to Haiti once the COVID restrictions are lifted?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think as my children get a little bit older, I'll probably plan a trip with them as well, because I want them to see. I want them to see how other people live. And I don't want them to grow up and take for granted, what they have, what they've been blessed with, what God has given to us as a family and as a nation, But absolutely, I can't wait to get back. And, the thing is, I'd love to go elsewhere too. I'd love to go, my church supports a ministry in Haiti. I know people that go to Honduras. So there are other places to go as well. And I think that if you have skills, if you're, especially in medicine, that it's almost part of it. You have to think of it from the perspective of the Hippocratic Oath. You take this oath to help people and to do no harm. And what greater privilege is there where you can go and serve in a third world country and help people who have, very little, if not no access to healthcare.
You made some comments earlier about a young girl being a slave. Is this something that's condoned by the government? Is this known by the government? Is there a class of people as slaves, or it's just appalled in the in our hemisphere even that they're slaves? I just can't come to grips with that. I'm outraged.
Yes, I don't know if the government knows about it or not, but or if they condone it. It may be something that they just turn a blind eye to, but it's very well known. I mean, here it is right here. I just found it. I just Googled it actually, and it has a special name. It's called Restavek, Restavek. I think that's what it's called. I vaguely remember that term. But if you Google it, it pops right up. Here's another article. Hundreds of thousands of Haitian children suffer in slavery. Restavek children, they're called. So it's a real thing, And when I was there, a group saved this poor girl, brought her to our clinic and they were trying to explain to me, and they assumed that I knew what a Restavek was, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. And then they had to explain the whole situation to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this girl was a slave? Like, I couldn't believe it. And then I looked it up, and it's true. And actually, I just Googled it on my phone, and it popped right up. So it's a real thing. And I treated one of these poor girls, and this group saved her out of that slavery.
Are the slaves, can't hardly bring myself to say the word.
I know.
Are they just house servants, or they work on farms, or is it something like sex slave?
Yeah, I don't know all areas in which they serve, right? But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, a lot of times it's just labor, but people, are perform some pretty sinful acts, and we see that even in America today, just
Certainly.
what's going on in America and around the world with trafficking women. So it's not, I wouldn't put it past households that have these slave children to use them as sex slaves as well. Now, I mean, I'm making a generalization, but I don't know really what happens. I just know it's there, and we know how people are. You know, people are sinful. They do terrible things. So I would imagine that it could happen.
I appreciate your wisdom and experience. Put that on my list, and might be the top of my list.
Right.
I didn't do something for the slaves of Haiti. It's just
That's horrifying.
hard to imagine.
It really is.
It's a terrible thing, but parents are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They sell their children in countries where they don't have any money. They can't afford to keep these children. A lot of times people lie to them saying they're going to take them and put them, educate them and do great things with them, and they pay the parents, and then it turns out it's actually a sex ring. So it happens all the time. I know so many people who are involved in trying to end sex trafficking, and that's a very common story.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. Here in the United States.
Yes, we've heard that too.
Oh yeah.
And it's happening in foreign countries.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
No, it's here in the hemisphere.
Yeah. So, and it is a shame, and we need to pray. We just need to pray as hard as we can for God to change things or return.
Yes, indeed. Well, we thank you so much, Dr. Leonard Dedesi, for being with us this morning on our initial program here of Sunspots, S-O-N spots, shining the light on people who are using their skills, gifts, and talents to help others who are in need. And I think those last things we were talking about show how greatly needed is that light to expose the darkness.
Yeah.
And your work there, Len, is a light in a dark place. And I'm sure that the people greatly appreciate it. And we appreciate what you do. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being our guest today.
I was absolutely honored. I always enjoy speaking with you guys. And if you ever want to take a trip to Haiti, let me know.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. You too. God bless.
It's a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for listening to our initial program today called Sunspots. It's a special feature where we're highlighting the work that people like Len do. You've been listening to Dr. Leonard Dedesi. He is an orthopedic surgeon, specializes in hand surgery, but as you can tell from what he told us, he has treated people with other ailments as well and injuries. So we thank him and we thank you for listening and hope you'll have a blessed day. Bye now.